So, as you will have known from last time, I had been out of hospital about 10 days after my ovarian cancer surgery, and I started to get these weird, random, unconnected symptoms. Or at least that's what I thought. And eventually I thought, well, I've got an appointment coming up with the surgeons, because technically you're post-surgical, the gynecological surgeons, and I asked them about these weird symptoms. And again, I got a very sort of, oh, don't worry, dear. It's all fine. It's not at all anything serious. In fact, we think it's a hernia. And they sent me trotting off, to be fair to them, on a very urgent appointment, because I was seen within about less than 2 weeks. I saw the general surgeon who dealt with hernias at the hospital, and he very quickly said to me, this is not a hernia. You have some damage to your, I'm sorry, I don't know anatomy, the muscles that go across in the abdomen on the left side, and that's because the ovarian tumour was pushing against it so much that it had become lazy, and the medical term's atrophied. So he recommended some gentle yoga or calisthenics to be done, gentle beginners ones, to try and reactivate that muscle. And then he would see me in 3 months and would reevaluate and see whether that muscle actually needed some surgical intervention or not. And again, that was the last I ever heard of him. I did try to contact the department and ask them what was going on, and they said his secretary would contact me, and she never did. Because in the meantime, I was also suffering with these symptoms. I had such itchy skin, I had raging night sweats, which were getting more frequent, and I was rapidly losing weight. So I did what I thought was the sensible thing, and I went back to my GP. My GP was great because she listened, and she said, we need to find out if this is something serious or not. So she ordered a very, very large set of bloods to be done on me, which they were, and those came back with the results that actually there was a problem. It wasn't looking like a lymphoma, but it was a blood problem. She could see that. And she said, look, I don't know enough because I'm not a hematologist, but I need to get you in front of a hematologist. So she referred me that day, and I got a text from the surgery a couple of hours later confirming that they had sent the referral. After 2 weeks, I called my surgery and said to them, I haven't heard anything from the hospital. Could you tell me why? And they said, well, we haven't heard from them either, but we'll chase it for you. They then phoned me back that afternoon and said, we've spoken to the hospital and they're rejecting the referral. And I said, well, can they even do that? And they said, well, they've done it on the grounds of GPs aren't allowed to refer direct to a hematologist anymore. And I said, but my GP didn't say anything about that. And she said, well, that's because we didn't know that they changed the rules on this. And I said, well, what do I do now? And they said, well, they're prepared to let you see a general oncologist, and they will decide whether you can go and see a hematologist. So I Julie went to the oncologist, and they ordered a huge range of scans and blood tests and lots of other things. So I had an appointment with rheumatology to check that I didn't have an autoimmune disease, which they would have known from my bloods anyway. I had to go and see an infectious diseases specialist because they wanted to rule out TB. The consultant that I saw said, I don't even know why you're here. It's really obvious you don't have TB. I had psychosomatic, actually, because I had a lung function test done. I also had endoscopy done, and the results of all of them came back, and I eventually saw the general oncologist again. And for those of you who've seen it, I have covered that particular consultation in a bit more depth, because that was when I was told that I had cancer. Now, of course, they didn't know what type of cancer or even where it originated, but they knew that the stuff that had been picked up on the scans was a secondary cancer. It wasn't the source of the cancer. The cancer had migrated there. So they had to try and find where the primary was. And in fact, we spent the next 6 months playing Hunt the Primary, and they couldn't find it. It was not gynecological. We had lots of scientific evidence that it wasn't gynecological. However, it was actually my gynae consultant who could see in an appointment how distressing it was for me playing this, well, let's see where it is game, that she said, it's a shame they can't do a biopsy. And I said, well, why can't they do a biopsy? And she said, well, with a lot of cancers, they're what's called solid tumours, so they're sizable lumps, and yours isn't. Yours is lots and lots of small ones, and they're in a very delicate place, so they can't just be biopsied. And I said, but that would tell us what the source was, because the DNA would tell us that. She said, yes, of course. Unbeknownst to me, she then went away and spoke to lots of colleagues and was told initially that, yes, the biopsy can't be done, just can't be done. And she then discovered that it can be done. It just can't be done at that particular hospital. It could be done, but there were only 5 hospitals in the whole country that will do it. And 3 of them are in London. So, yay for me, but it's genuinely a travesty that in other parts of the country, it's much more of a lottery about whether you live near those other 2 places. So I was sent by the gynecologist to have the biopsy done. And they did it, and because they are a specialist service, they tested for everything, absolutely everything they could think of. And bingo, they came back, and it was about 4 or 5 days after I'd had the biopsy done, and they said, we know what it is. We know exactly what it is. And it's a type of leukemia, and it's called Langerhans cell histiocytosis. It's an incredibly rare condition. As far as I know, there are about 30 adults in the country with it. There are more children with it. It predominantly affects children between the ages of 1 and 3 years. So it's rare, but more rare for an adult. And some of the skin itching, which isn't that common with Langerhans, I was sent to a dermatologist, in fact an oncologist who specialises in dermatology, or the other way around. And that was at the National Cancer Centre, again in London. she looked at it and we talked, and she biopsied it, and it is likely, although these things can never be proven, but it certainly looks logically likely that the leukemia started to manifest itself in my skin, hence all the itchy skin, and possibly the night sweats, I don't know. They were looking at was a primary that was actually skin. Don't know if the genius I saw initially, the general oncologist, would have ever worked that out, but they did piece it together. So although it's a blood cancer, it manifests, it settles in various places, and skin, bone and lung are the three most common places that it will settle. And with me, it settled in the skin, and it has transferred, or whatever it's called. It's also happened now in the lung. So I have it in two different places. I have a haematologist. The first haematologist I had was so bad that I couldn't work with him at all, ever. But I happily got re-referred by my GP to a haematologist who is more than wonderful. So I'm confident in him, I'm confident in my dermatologist, and I now have 4 different hospitals looking after me for various forms of tumour/cancer. So that's exciting, and involves pootling around London trying to get to appointments. But that's where things got to, and that whole journey, both parts, took about 2 years. From being a healthy, normal individual doing their stuff, never on any medication, just living normal life, to suddenly 2 years later I've been diagnosed with 2 different forms of cancer and a brain tumour. So in some ways my head is still spinning, but in other ways I've started to get to grips with it. I've started to. Thank you enormously for your time. I really, really appreciate it. Again, that was a bit of a marathon, but you now know the background, and I think for those who are interested but don't have cancer, there's also a thing about, well, what symptoms did you have? Are there symptoms I should be worried about? That sort of thing. And no, I didn't have symptoms that I should be worried about. Sorry about that. That took me over 15 minutes to say, but I appreciate you spending that time with me. I will see you again in the next one, and thank you for listening.